Good afternoon or good evening, depending on where you might be. My name is Kevin Michael Grace, and this is the KMG show for Friday, December the 10th, 2021. So let's have some Schadenfreude, shall we? Jussie Smollett will appeal guilty verdict. Committed he is to clearing his name. This is from Breitbart. In the courtroom, as the verdict was read, the guilty verdict, Smollett stood and faced the jury, showing no visible reaction. He and his family later left the courthouse without comment. Outside court, Special Prosecutor Dan Webb called the verdict a resounding message by the jury that Smollett did exactly what we said he did. Smollett wreaked havoc here in the city for weeks on end for no reason whatsoever, then compounded the problem by lying under oath to the jury, Webb said. Defense attorney Nenye Uche said Smollett would appeal his conviction. He said that Smollett was disappointed, but holding up very strong and is committed to clearing his name. He expressed confidence the actor would be cleared by an appellate court. Quote, "Unfortunately, we were facing an uphill battle where Jussie was already tried and convicted in the media, and then we had to somehow get the jury to forget or unsee all the news stories that they'd been hearing that were negative for the last 3 years," Uche told reporters after the verdict. The damage to his personal and professional life may be more severe, given that many people are saying that he won't serve a day in jail. Smollett lost his role on the TV program Empire after prosecutors said the alleged attack was a hoax, and he told jurors earlier this week, "I've lost my livelihood." The defense position appears to be that he was charged with 6 counts and he was convicted of only 5. So the verdict of guilty in 5 must be thrown aside because he was found not guilty on 6, number 6. Very, very strange thinking from the defense team. And looking at these people, I don't really think that Jussie Smollett picked the best people to represent him. Here's a story from the Daily Mail. Chicago police chief who arrested Jussie Smollett says he would have let him off if he'd apologized. Okay. This is from Jennifer Smith. The Chicago police chief who arrested him, Eddie Johnson, was in charge of the force when Smollett staged the hoax attack. He has since been fired for misconduct after he was found drunk at the wheel of his parked patrol car and after it emerged that he'd had affairs with female staff. Ah, yes, Chicago. Never change. Johnson said, "Let me say this. Myself and Mayor Rahm Emanuel were upset at the time that he strained our city and you put all that manpower into it. But I want people to understand this. This was not the most heinous crime of the century. He didn't kill anybody. He didn't blow up a building. We would have been more than happy with just an apology at the end of all that. We uncovered, but for some reason, he just wanted to keep going down this road that he was actually a victim." Johnson said he had to convince other Chicago PD cops to keep treating Smollett as a victim and not a suspect. He was immediately suspicious, he said, after he saw the video of Smollett being interviewed in his apartment by police detectives. Quote, "I have to be honest, when I first saw the video of him in his apartment with the noose around his neck, I was concerned because I don't think there's many black people in America with a noose around their neck and wouldn't immediately take it off. Probably few white people would keep the noose around their neck either. And the way he was nonchalant handling it gave me cause for concern. But I would not let the police department make him an offender until the evidence just got to be so overwhelming. I stopped the department from calling him an offender for quite a while. To use a symbol like a noose to promote yourself is just unconscionable to me. The city of Chicago, we'd been making so much progress at that time in terms of violent crime. It just hurt me that a black person would use a black symbol like that and create a crime where no crime occurred. It was tough. It really was," unquote. Apart from the noose, which prosecutors say Smollett tightened for effect, Johnson said that he was also suspicious about the Subway sandwich, the tuna Subway sandwich. Yes, that's exactly the sort of thing that a rich man wants at 2 o'clock in the morning. Some of Subway's famous tuna, and there you might have seen that there's been some controversy as to whether this actually is, in effect, tuna. Quote, looking back on it, the part about the noose, but what really struck us oddly, I've been a cop 31 years. I'd been in the detective division working homicides a lot. What really struck us all was the fact that he got attacked on the coldest night of the year during a polar vortex. It was insanely cold. Nobody was out. But I tell you one thing that really tipped us off, that told us there was a problem. If somebody gets jumped like that, let me back up a bit. He went to a Subway sandwich shop at like 2 in the morning to get a sandwich. Okay, that's fine. He comes back, gets attacked in a hate crime, supposed hate crime, and during all this scuffle, they poured bleach on him. When he got up and went into his apartment building, he got up and still had that Subway sandwich with him. That doesn't happen. When people get attacked like that, whatever belongings they have out there, they usually leave it until the police can go back with them because they're afraid. This guy had the sandwich in his hand and it had never been touched. That was a real tipping point to us that something was amiss. Yes, indeed. I looked up the weather on that night. What was it, January the 29th? And at midnight, 2 hours before the alleged attack, it was minus 10 degrees Fahrenheit. But I guess nothing can come between a man and his Subway sandwich. This was a political case right from the very beginning. Of course, we're supposed to forget all that, but here's Joel Pollack at Breitbart. Actor Jussie Smollett was convicted of 5 counts of felony disorderly conduct Thursday for faking a hate crime in Chicago after former Michelle Obama aide Tina Chen had urged Cook County State Attorney Kim Foxx not to prosecute him. Chen admitted reaching out to Foxx on behalf of an unnamed Smollett relative. Foxx, who received over $400,000 from George Soros for her campaign in 2016, dropped the charges and later recused herself from the case. Chen would later be appointed chief executive officer of Time's Up, the organization attempting to drive sexual misconduct out of Hollywood, but she had to resign earlier this year after offering advice to then New York Governor Andrew Cuomo as he faced claims of sexual harassment. Smollett also received a White House shout-out from then President Barack Obama in 2016. I was curious to see how the gay black mafia would react to Smollett's conviction. Most of them are standing by Jussie, but one prominent member, Don Lemon of CNN, is not. Lemon said, and this is from Pam Key at Breitbart, so here's the breaking news. A jury in Chicago finding actor Jussie Smollett guilty of 5 of 6 counts of lying to police when he falsely claimed to be the victim of a racist and anti-gay hate attack. A judge will decide if he'll face time behind bars or get probation. Legal analyst Joey Jackson at CNN said it's the proper results when you look at the case, the circumstances, everything else. Lemon said, quote, he had to make up too many lies as to why he didn't want to do certain things, like to cover. How is this man on TV? I guess he got caught up in that because he took the stand himself. He got angry with the prosecutor as the prosecutor poked holes in his story, calling the only other witnesses liars. Here's what folks are concerned about, that what he did might undermine future victims, legitimate victims of hate crimes. Let's not think about the racial hatred that Smollett fomented against white people, because they're not really important in the larger scheme of things. So this story was dubious from the start for all sorts of reasons. I mentioned the temperature. I mentioned the seemingly irresistible pull of the tuna Subway sandwich. But there was the risible belief on Smollett's part that rednecks, a lot of rednecks in downtown Chicago, that rednecks in America would all recognize Jussie Smollett. Oh, but of course. Justice for Jussie. This is Natasha Anderson and Alistair Talbot at the Daily Mail. Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, and the cream of woke America are slammed for their deafening silence after Jussie Smollett's conviction, having first branded it a modern-day lynching. Yes, and as I pointed out before, this is not at all like a modern-day lynching, because lynchings end with people being dead. Joe Biden tweeted, "What happened today to Jussie Smollett must never be tolerated in this country. We must stand up and demand that we no longer give this hate safe harbor, that homophobia and racism have no place on our streets or in our hearts. We are with you, Jussie." Kamala Harris, seemingly channeling Lawrence Harvey, or statements about Lawrence Harvey's character in The Manchurian Candidate, tweeted, "Jussie Smollett is one of the kindest, most gentle human beings I know. I'm praying for his quick recovery. This was an attempted modern-day lynching. No one should have to fear for their life because of their sexuality or color of their skin. We must confront this hate." Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez said, "There is no such thing as racially charged. This attack was not possibly homophobic. It was a racist and homophobic attack. If you don't like what is happening to our country, then work to change it. It is no one's job to water down or sugarcoat the rise of hate crimes." Oh, and here's Rashida Tlaib, Congresswoman Tlaib, being one of the most hateful women in America. "When one of the most famous Black and gay men in America is not safe." What? "The message is clearer than it has ever been. The dangerous lies spewing from the right wing is killing and hurting our people. Thinking of you, Jussie Smollett, and my alphabet people, neighbors." Nancy Pelosi later deleted this tweet, but here's the original. "The racist, homophobic attack on Jussie Smollett is an affront to our humanity. No one should be attacked for who they are or whom they love." Golly, that sounds like a universal injunction, doesn't it? Love is love. Yes, and we're going to see the sting in that tale soon enough. "I pray that Jussie has a speedy recovery and that justice is served. May we all commit to ending this hate once and for all." Bernie Sanders tweeted, "The racist and homophobic attack on Jussie Smollett is a horrific instance of the surging hostility toward minorities around the country. We must come together to eradicate all forms of bigotry and violence." Eradicate all forms of bigotry and violence. Only a lunatic would say something like that. But I don't think that words don't mean much to people like that. Reese Witherspoon from Hollywood. "This is beyond upsetting. What happened to Jussie Smollett is a truly horrible, racist, homophobic hate crime. I hope we can find an end to the hate and fear that plagues this country. Praying for your recovery, Jussie." Zendaya. "This is heartbreaking and terrifying. Please pay attention to what's happening here. Sending all my love to Jussie Smollett." Shonda Rhimes, powerful showrunner. "We all have a responsibility to rise up against the ignorance and hate out there. If you know who did this to Jussie Smollett, report them to the police." The amusingly named Ariana Grande tweeted, "What happened to Jussie just makes me really effing sick to my stomach. I can't believe shit like this is really still happening every day. What kind of world? Sending all of the healing energy, love I possibly can, and hoping for change. What can we do? Tell me. And I'm there." Ariana Grande was, of course, in Manchester, England, at a concert which was prevented from happening by Muslim extremists who bombed the place. And she asks the question, "I can't believe shit like this is really happening every day. What kind of world?" Apparently, this woman has learned nothing. Senator Kirsten Gillibrand, who laughably ran for president, said this is and she also made a drag potato. Yes, all the Democratic candidates had to make their own drag queen potato, because that's the sort of thing Democrats do now. Gillibrand said this is a sickening and outrageous attack, and horribly, it's the latest of too many hate crimes against alphabet people and people of color. We are all responsible for condemning this behavior, and every person who enables or normalizes it, praying for Jussie and his family. And I see that surfer mommy Tulsi Gabbard let us down. This is so heartbreaking. Jussie Smollett, you are not alone. We are with you. We must stand up and condemn this hate, bigotry, and violence wherever it rears its ugly head. No one should live in fear because of the color of their skin or who they love. Stop saying that. Who they love, it doesn't matter who you love. By that standard, I guess incest, polygamy, and pedophilia must be legalized if love is love. Pete Buttigieg says, well, the struggle for basic hate crime legislation continues here in Indiana. This horrible attack calls all Americans to stand against hatred and violence in all its forms. And Cory Booker was there too, and, well, everybody, pretty much. Amanda Prestigiacomo in the Daily Wire, 12 top Democrats tweets about the Jussie Smollett hate crime. They didn't age well. Well, why didn't they age well? Well, because if a black man accuses a white man of anything in America, well, he has to be believed. Believe black people. Despite the, Steve Saylor mentioned yesterday that he has been carrying on about hate hoaxes since 2004. And it's now my reflexive belief that when I come across one of these cases, I think it's faked, because they usually are. But no, to America's ruling class, hate hoax? What are you talking about? And then when it's proved to be a hoax, well, we need a dialogue. I mean, can you imagine how horrible conditions must be that a black man, a brave, black, talented, gay man would be driven to doing something like this? Yeah, okay. And, yes, a lot of people had some fun with this, and quite rightfully so. And I've seen so many pictures of Jussie Smollett weeping. Dinesh D'Souza said, let's just say that Jussie kicked his own ass really good this time. Michael Malise said, I guess this is MAGA country after all. Blair White said, poor Jussie, hope he doesn't beat himself up over this. Cat Turd said, for the first time in my life, I agree with Al Sharpton. The guilty must face the maximum. Jake Paquette said, Jussie Smollett can sleep in peace tonight knowing his attacker was finally brought to justice. Liz Wheeler said, I'm so glad they caught and convicted Jussie Smollett's attacker. And many such examples. Paul Bois at Breitbart, Hollywood celebrities who backed Jussie Smollett silent after guilty verdict. And I had the occasion, as perhaps many of you did, to see the clip again of Ellen Page, as that person then was on Stephen Colbert's show, pretty much having a nervous breakdown about this and pretty much blaming Mike Pence, then vice president, and apparently Mike Pence is responsible for murder. This person was clearly off its head. Oh, Katy Perry, Cher, Viola Davis, OMG. This is why the alphabet community continue to fight to be seen. Oh, yes. They have an invisibility problem, do they? And protected against hate. We all have to take this racist and homophobic act of violence very personally. My arms are around you, Jussie Smollett. You are loved. Mindy Kaling, Kerry Washington, Alyssa Milano. Could that woman possibly be more wrong about everything? And let's go to the chat. Hello to Palpcasso88 and Dan. Hello to our valiant moderator, Chad Chadson. Thank you for your service. Hello to Dan Allison. No sleep till Breezewood, Pennsylvania says, okay. Still in awe that Smollett is a confirmed, yeah, we knew that already though, didn't we? Hello to Chogokin 666. William Hicks says, good evening, Kevin. For some odd reason, the Star Wars Christmas special from the late 70s, which is 1 hour, 43 minutes long, showed up right next to your live stream tonight. It was a tough choice. Is the whole of that actually available to watch? I mean, in a watchable condition, not some 10th generation VCR dub? I've seen numerous specials on the special, and I'll say it again, that you will often hear people say that such and such is so bad that you must watch this. And you say, yeah, I've heard that so many times and I've been disappointed. You will not be disappointed if you watch the Star Wars holiday special. It reminds me of Nathan Rabine's famous comment that 1970s Hollywood seems to have been directed by a sentient bag of cocaine. Just incredible, incredible stuff. Dan says, nothing like a glowing green tuna sub. David Wright says, if hate hoaxes weren't so prevalent, I doubt most people would know about the relevance of the noose. Indeed, we had that black NASCAR driver who was complaining about a noose, and it wasn't a noose, it was a knot. And I guess, knots are very problematic in America now. I mean, the things that, ropes are made out of, hemp and the like, they have other uses besides hanging people. William Hicks says the tipping point was a sandwich. LOL, it usually is. Justin Proto says, always tuna on toast, maybe better luck with chicken salad on rye and a cup of tea. Yes, obligatory Seinfeld reference. Buddy says, Kevin, Lisa Welchel is extremely well preserved, and for that reason, she deserves respect. Lisa, Facts of Life or some such show? I know I didn't. I didn't watch it. Gloria Miller, a name new to me, says, we will either accuse ourselves or excuse ourselves. That's Saint Jean Vianney, the Cure d'Ars. Gloria Miller says, I have taken an oath in my heart to oppose communism until the day I die. That's from Eldridge Cleaver. Chokakin 666 says, it was an affront to my, I don't know what that word is, actually. Dr. Deadname says, oh, there's surging hostility, all right. Dan says, Jussie should have hired Legally Blondie. Ashley Main Bravo says, do you think this hoax was something French actor Jussie Smollett, as he's been called by Dave Chappelle, planned or was talked into doing? Well, there was the letter that he faked, the death threat letter, which had letters cut out of magazines. Oh, and it had anthrax in it, which turned out to be crushed Tylenol. So he worked up to this. Apparently, my understanding is that he didn't get the reaction he expected from this obviously fake death threat. And so he had to kick it up a notch. Joel Gerke says, it's not a phobia, it's disgust. Was the kind of sandwich he ordered disclosed as outbreak? Yes, it was Subway's legendary kind of sort of tuna. Dr. Deadname says the fact that people fell for this proves that people aren't rational and that rationality can't save us. Is Subway even open at 2 a.m.? Well, this one was. I mean, the proof is in the sandwich, which he took back to his apartment. I don't know. I mean, I have been attacked physically while waiting for a bus in Vancouver. That was in 1999. I can tell you that I was really dazed for quite some time afterwards and not really thinking very clearly. and just sort of, I mean, my anxiety level was through the roof, you know. But no, got to save that sandwich. William Hicks says, I wonder, is AOC perhaps related to Hernando Cortez? I bet not. She definitely bears some resemblance to his horse, though. She's claimed all sorts of ancestry, including Jewish ancestry, which is absolutely hilarious to me because Puerto Rico, of course, was part of the Spanish Empire, and Jews were expelled from the Spanish Empire in 1924 and were not admitted, in 1492, and were not readmitted until 1924. The Jews that fled Spain went to North Africa primarily. They didn't go to Puerto Rico, which, of course, that hadn't even been discovered at the time, but never mind that. All sorts of, Freddie Prinze, the actor, he just went overboard similarly, claiming that he's this, that, and the other. Don't want to leave anybody out. Let's see. Hello, buddy. And hello to Professor Paul Kakvapajavaicha, who has sentient cocaine. Well, there's a definite mania about so much that was produced in the 1970s. No Sleep says Nathan Rabin. That's a name I haven't heard in ages. He left the AV Club to go to this startup, which was supposed to be a film and such like, and that collapsed after a few months. So he's back at the AV Club. Not that I used to go to the AV Club all the time because it was very amusing. Frequently amusing, and the comment sections were great, and it's got so horrendously woke that, oh no, apparently in a movie, do you know that in a movie made in the 30s, they do a gag where there's a black cook in the kitchen and the train is, back and forth, and he gets flour on his face and he looks like a white man, and isn't that the most horrible thing imaginable? Yeah. Okay. Also, I like their interviews of character actors, random roles. Will Harris did those. You can find them still. I think there's hundreds of them. Great stuff. And then they decided there weren't enough drag queens, or there weren't enough gay people who hadn't really accomplished anything in their lives. So now random roles, I don't know that Will Harris even does them or is allowed to do them anymore. Random roles is now unreadable. Okay. Hello to Texas Feral Hog. Carrie Fisher was crazy high in that special, says Dan, and you can see her cocaine dipping finger. You can see it in the special repeatedly. You have one fingernail, I guess probably on this finger, much longer than the others in order to facilitate snorting cocaine. Okay. Who else do we have here? Hello to Ann Run. Jonathan Paul says many Jews hid fake converts and went to Nuevo Leon and then Nuevo Mexico. Have you tried the Justin Bieber Timbits? Says Palpcasso 88. Now, come. I'm insulted. Okay. What are we going to talk about next? We are going to talk about, oh, yes. This is from Kane at Citizen Free Press. A fellow who is the head of the LA Police Protective Society or whatever, he gave an interview with CBS Los Angeles saying, people want to come to LA for the holidays. My advice is stay away. We cannot protect you. And he proceeded to compare Los Angeles today to The Purge. Yes. This is from John Nolte at Breitbart. Media fail, Biden and Harris unfavorable ratings worse than Trump's. And John Nolte is very pleased about this. To me, this says only one thing, one significant thing that puts a smile on my face and a song in my heart. The era of the establishment media being able to gaslight the public is over. Yeah, what about COVID-19? The media's dishonest and corrupt demonization campaign against Trump is unlike anything I've seen in 40 years of watching politics. Billions and billions have been spent and are still being spent to demonize this man, and the media just can't do it. The media campaign has been coordinated, unrelenting, and as well funded as any propaganda campaign in world history, and the media just can't do it, not even with the help of the Nazis in the FBI. Think about how discredited the media must be that they have failed this resoundingly. It seems almost impossible with all the levers of power at their disposal, all that money, the ability to saturate and coordinate. Trump's in better shape than Biden and Harris. Two people the media use that same power to protect, boost, and swoon over. This is not just a credit to the American people and new media, but an indictment of just how transparently craven, shameless, and corrupt the establishment media have become. Of course, the fake media's biggest problem is how bubbled they have become. The media are no longer capable of self-reflection, of seeing themselves in the way normal people see them. Because of this, because they believe Twitter reflects real life, they have become blatantly dishonest, unapologetic liars, and insufferably smug. Well, one of the reasons for that is that people who became journalists often did other things in life before they became journalists. That is to say, they didn't go to J school, straight from high school, or went into journalism after being at some think tank or political campaign. They had what is called today life experience, and they were typically well aware, as I mentioned before, that ordinary people are not like them. Ordinary people are not obsessed with the news, particularly with the minutiae of the news. I'll give you an example. If you look at political reporting, most of it, after a year, 6 months, maybe even a month, much of it makes little sense because you're concentrating on one thing that happened, which you have blown up out of all proportion, which is why journalist books about politics tend to be useless because, oh, yeah, remember that story I wrote 3.5 years ago? And, oh, yeah, did that thing happen? No, I'd forgotten about that. Now, I was a reporter for quite a few years and an editor, and I've often had the experience of coming across randomly stories that I had written and had been published, and I look at the story and, what? I wrote that? Really? Apparently I knew something about this subject and I had opinions about it. Yeah. Okay, let's talk about the supply crisis. And here is a story by Paul Berger, the Wall Street Journal, excuse me. The backup of container ships waiting to enter the nation's busiest port complex isn't letting up, but it has moved farther from shore. Only about 30 vessels sat within sight of the ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach this week, waiting for berths at a gateway that has come to symbolize U.S. supply chain bottlenecks. More than 60 others destined for the port complex remained in waters farther out to sea, some hundreds or even thousands of miles away, including ships that reduced speed during their voyage from Asia to delay their arrival. The ships are complying with the voluntary system set up last month by maritime officials because of fears the ports can't safely accommodate the crush of waiting vessels as winter weather sweeps in with strong winds and rough seas. Yes, 24/7. I don't know. I just, let's just do a Control F here. That's trucks, okay? References to trucks in this story. The Biden administration and maritime officials have sought to reduce the backlog with measures that include an attempt to extend the hours truckers pick up boxes. The measures have had limited impact, in part because of shortages of workers, trucking equipment, and the sheer volume of boxes flowing into and out of the port. Yeah, there's no mention in this story that the state of California passed a law that no trucks 3 years or older are allowed to ferry cargo to containers or ferry cargo from containers. There is also no mention in this story that the ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach are two of the very worst in the world. Something like 147th out of 149. And, you know, I think a reporter might want to ask questions. How is it that the ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach could have been, long before this latest crisis, the worst in the world? How did that happen? What are the reasons why? But no. Apparently, you know, it's circumstances beyond anyone's control. Oh, PETA is definitely in the Christmas spirit. Christmas events are anything but merry for reindeer. The Christmas season is a time for empathy and kindness, not carting sensitive reindeer around to crowded and frightening events. Happy holidays, reindeer use in Christmas events. Never heard of that. Golly, they never heard of Christmas either. Do they know it's Christmas? The reindeer? No, they don't, sadly. Reindeer, also known as caribou, are herd animals who travel upward of 1,000 miles during their annual migration in nature. But when they're strapped to Santa's sleigh and used in Christmas parades, displays, other holiday events, or movies, they're denied the opportunity to travel, forage, and socialize with others in their herd. Instead, event-goers harass these sensitive animals with unwanted touches. Handlers restrain them with halters and reins, and noisy crowds cause them stress. Yes. Such a terrible life for these tame reindeer. Uh-oh, wait a minute. It gets worse. Treating reindeer as inanimate objects, like the sleighs they're strapped to, is a form of speciesism, a human supremacist worldview that ignores that animals are thinking, feeling individuals. They're not individuals who have the right to live free from exploitation. I've long been of the belief that people who run PETA are completely bonkers. This was really brought home to me in the 1990s during the AIDS crisis, when their chief spokesman, yes, Dan Matthews is the man's name, and PETA takes a stance against all animal testing for medical purposes. And he was asked, what about HIV/AIDS? What about the possibility of medicines and vaccines being developed to combat HIV/AIDS? No exceptions. Oh, Dan Matthews is a homosexual himself, I should point out. His response is, this is an exact quotation, my response is, don't get diseases in the first place, schmo. Oh, well, I never really looked at it that way before. I think, I'm going to take the Dan Matthews challenge, and I'm going to commit to never having a disease. I just feel pounds lighter after that. It was just there under my nose the whole time. As frequently pointed out in this space, the most woke, politically progressive organizations are the very worst places to to work. And the reason for that is the people who are drawn to work at these places are deranged. This is from Prism, whatever that is, prismreports.org, by Tina Vasquez. A Guttmacher Institute staff say a toxic work culture has the reproductive rights research giant in a death spiral. At a critical time for reproductive rights, health, and justice, current and former staff say discrimination and a long-standing white feminist ethos, boo, have pushed out BIPOC, caregivers, and disabled workers. Last year, the police murder of George Floyd, which has the relevance to that of the Alan Goodmacher Institute. It's an offshoot of Planned Parenthood. They typically do research on sexuality. It sparked months of protests over police brutality and racism and triggered calls for accountability across industries, including the reproductive rights, health, and justice field. In June 2020, the racial reckoning, oh, there's that word again, came to the Washington, D.C. office of internationally renowned Sexual and Reproductive Health and Rights Research Institute, Guttmacher. Because of the pandemic, the reckoning came in the form of a disastrous Zoom meeting. Well, how disastrous? Guttmacher's current vice president for public policy, Heather Boonstra, reportedly began the June 2nd meeting with the Washington, D.C. public policy team by acknowledging the murder of Floyd and offering some thoughts about racism and the importance of Guttmacher's work, according to employees who were present. She then invited staffers to discuss their feelings and share how they were finding equilibrium. Staff members suggested that Guttmacher put supportive policies in place for Black staff and other employees of color, including loosening deadlines and implementing more proactive and explicit policies for leave without penalty. Don't these people realize how bad it makes them look? Oh, yes, because we're Black, we don't have to do our work on time, and we can just not come to work without penalty. Okay. Staffers also try to get managers to agree to more training on racial equity and microaggressions that would go beyond what Guttmacher had already offered, which they said felt like token efforts, or even the facilitator conceded not enough time had been allotted to cover everything. Their suggestions were met with a chilly reception. According to multiple employees, when staff suggested Guttmacher do something tangible for Black employees in other divisions of the organization, Boonstra became frustrated. Why were staffers talking about workplace problems instead of police brutality? She reportedly said. Yes, I'm sure. I'm sure she said that. I'm here to talk about George Floyd and the other African-American men who had been beaten up by society, Boonstra reportedly said. Then, staffers told Prism, she called them self-centered and said she was disappointed by their behavior. Oh, and I have another example of this. Of course, such examples are myriad. This is from Sophia Akram at Vice World News. Racism is flourishing in the UK charity sector. Former charity workers told Vice World News that some organizations committed to social justice are failing to live up to their values. At the start, I hate saying this. I think I was just grateful to have a job, says Sadia Dar, who is a British Pakistani who started working at Quakers, a UK-based Christian charity, in 2017, and for a while led comments citing racist tropes slide. One manager had insinuated to Dar that her partner should be working for the cause rather than working in the city, that means the financial sector, because he's a Black man. Really? He really said that, did he? But the turning point came in January 2019 with the arrival of a new manager. Grievance documents seen by Vice, including the reports of an external HR consultant, show how an already strained relationship deteriorated rapidly following the terror attack in Christchurch, New Zealand, in which 8 white supremacists killed 51 people at 2 mosques, which has what to do with a Quaker charity in England? I guess we'll find out. As a Muslim, Dar was deeply saddened by the attack and messaged family and friends to stay safe while attending evening prayers. She was left to formulate the Quakers' messaging on her own and felt distressed and unsupported by her team. Okay, why don't you formulate our message on this? Oh, no, but I'm all alone and I'm so distressed. She raises in an email to her manager, who responded that she had been abrupt and had spoken to him with a hostile facial expression and with a raised tone of voice. Dar felt these were microaggressions based on tropes linked to women of color. I don't think I even realized the impact it had on me until I was furloughed at the start of the pandemic, Dar says, describing how she would barely get through days at the end. But I think just the constant mistreatment from when he started, that's what led me to raise my first grievance. When Dar raised a grievance against her manager, he responded with a counter grievance. In the counter grievance, it was claimed that Dar supported terrorist violence because she shared an Al Jazeera article about Palestine on Twitter. No one realized that was Islamophobic by accusing me of supporting Hamas, the only Muslim in the team, she said. Well, as I keep pointing out, intersectionality, it's a circular firing squad. It's the war of all against all. This is again from Vice. Tim Hume, a black writer who boycotted the world's largest book fair because of the presence of far-right publishers. Setting off a fierce debate over free speech in Germany, said she was surprised the event's organizers have allowed the extremists to continue to appear at the event. Okay. Nazis, apparently. Okay, so one group, Jung Europa Publishing, there's no room for Nazis next to me. I don't talk to Nazis. I don't listen to Nazis. I don't read books by Nazis. Okay, Nazis. Okay, where's evidence that these are Nazis? Jung Europa sells titles such as Against Liberalism by Alain de Benoist. Okay. The French political philosopher considered the intellectual godfather of the alt-right identitarian movement. The company is run by Philip Stein, a curious name for a Nazi, who also leads the far-right activism network 1% für unser Land. Okay. And oh, yes. How stupid have men become? Because I'm coming to the conclusion that they become very, very stupid indeed. Here is one data point from the New York Post. Andrew Court, mom, 48, stole daughter's identity to start college, date young guys. Missouri mama, okay, is facing jail time after she admitted to stealing her estranged daughter's identity in order to secure student loans, enroll in college, and pursue her sexy co-ed fantasies. Laura Oglesby, 48, posed as her daughter, Lauren Hayes, for more than 2 years in an elaborate scam that fooled both the federal government and locals in the small town of Mountain View. In 2016, Oglesby applied for a Social Security card in Hayes' name, which she promptly received in the mail. From that point on, Oglesby, who originally hailed from Arkansas and was then age 43, assumed her daughter's identity, saying her name was Lauren Hayes and that she was only 22 years old. The fraudster even started seducing unsuspecting men in their early 20s who had no idea that Oglesby was almost 2 decades older than she said she was. Everyone believed it. She even had boyfriends that believed she was that age, 22 years old, Chief Jamie Perkins of the Mountain View Police Department told the New York Times. And here's a picture of her, which is one of those Instagram filters with its stupid ears and the dog nose. This does not look like a human. This could be anybody. 43-year-old woman posing as a 22-year-old woman. I'm going to suggest another possibility here, that the men who are having sex with her didn't care about her age. Apparently, she really wanted to have sex with them, and 22, you say? Okay, we'll just let that one slide. Okay. Disturbing photos obtained by Missouri news station KY3 appeared to show Oglesby even had her own Snapchat account where she pretended to be Hayes and posed with an array of youthful filters over her face. Yeah, that's kind of a giveaway. She had completely adopted a younger lifestyle, clothing, makeup, and personality. She had completely assumed becoming a younger person in her early 20s. Detective Stetson Schwein, apparently that's a real name, told the local ABC outlet. Oglesby moved in with local couple Avery and Wendy Parker, a pair of apparently kind strangers in Mountain View, who believed she was a young woman running away from a domestic violence situation. That always works. This woman does not look, I'm looking at a large picture of her here when she is supposed to be 22. She does not look anything like she is 22. The manipulative mom told her her name was Lauren Hayes, and she went to live with the Parkers for close to 2 years. No, I should mention something else, and I'm thinking back to when I was 22 years old, and what a 22-year-old thinks is old is like 30. They're like, ugh, 30 years old. And then someone over 40, that's like, 1 foot in the grave. During that time, Oglesby applied for a Missouri driver's license in her daughter's name before enrolling in Southwest Baptist University. She applied for financial aid and received $9,400 in federal student loans, $5,920 in Pell Grants, and $1,863 in finance charges. The system works. She even worked at the local Mountain View Library, where locals knew her as Lauren Hayes. However, after more than 2 years, the elaborate scam came crashing down in August 2018. Police in Mountain View were contacted by authorities in Arkansas who believed Oglesby had committed financial fraud by using the name of her daughter. Here's another picture of her at the time. And, putting up those little fake cat ears. Oh, well, this just strips decades from me. Recognizing the name, investigators approached Oglesby, who initially denied stealing her daughter's identity. However, it's reported that she subsequently broke down and admitted to the fraud. Oglesby is facing 5 years behind bars without parole after pleading guilty to 1 count of intentionally providing false information to the Social Security Administration. Under the terms of her plea agreement, Oglesby must also pay $17,521 in restitution to Southwest Baptist University in Missouri and to her daughter. It'll be interesting to see whether this woman actually goes to prison and Jussie Smollett does not. Jussie Smollett's crime is much graver, much graver, both in terms of how the vast cost in police resources wasted, but also, again, the fomenting of racial hatred. Let's go back to the chat. Ashley Man Bravo says one of the co-creators of the AstraZeneca vax is warning that the next pandemic is going to be worse. I'm getting to that. Dan says the men knew. She definitely looks her age. Yes, indeed. The guys just probably thought she was nuts, says Dr. A Dead Name. Okay. Animal research is unnecessary and a depraved scam, says Jovikin 666. Well, as we have seen in the last year and a half, if you're not going to experiment on animals, then you're going to have to experiment on people. Joel Gerke says people who are not humbled by the animals are analogous to people who think Bach is for the effete. It's a species of blindness. Read George MacDonald or something. Mainstream media outlets are reporting that Bitcoin has been a boon for white nationalists, says Ashiman Bravo. Oh, people are talking about loose leaf tea. I used to do that when I was young. I'd buy the Twinings or Twinnings, however it's pronounced, in their handsome metal boxes. And I had the device, you put the tea in. I don't know. You were always getting tea leaves in there, I suppose. Of course, it's been a long time. Been a long time since I have bought brand name tea. Just the stuff, the generic stuff I get from the supermarket is good enough for me. Hauper says, I've heard elk and antelope meat is superior to deer. Middle schools are the worst, says Professor Paul, because the children are straight from Lord of the Flies and their parents support them in this against teachers. Dionysa says, I used to work as a lab tech. Do you have any idea what they do to these animals, KMG? Yes, I do. Yako Raipala, our Finnish friend, says reindeer is tasty. Also, if I was a reindeer, I would want to be one of those Christmas village reindeers, since they just pull some kids in a sled a few weeks a year. Lapland tourist season is not long. Popcasso88 says she's living proof of Oberon Waugh's quote about ugly women. Isn't exploitation a purely human concept and a modern-day Western one of that? Asks Sean Clow. Cats are feline supremacists, says Dr. Deadname. Steve Bannon said we were close to Ray Kurzweil's singularity, says Ashyman Bravo. Golly, I hope not. Reindeer are tasty, agrees Professor Pohl. I've had some in Helsinki. Ashyman Bravo says Steve Bannon and Luke Rudkowski were on Tim Pool's podcast, and Bannon said Elon Musk said chips were going to be implanted in human brains next year and linked to some network called Neuralini. Okay. It's terrible to contemplate how few politicians are hanged. G.K. Chesterton, OG Fed poster, says Seraphim Goose. Joel Gerke says, I really think it's important to frame the Smollett affair for what it was, an attempt to kindle a black-on-white murder rampage. I don't think that's unfair at all, actually. CGI Sean Young in Blade Runner 2, terrible, says Buddy. CGI Carrie Fisher in her last role fooled no one. Yes, we've run out of actors. Have we? We have to, drag Peter Cushing from the grave. I suppose, George Lucas, he probably would have preferred just, using dead people in his films. Okay. Let's talk about something else here. Let's talk about Canada. Yes, stop groaning. Stop groaning. Yes. What's it? Michael Kinsley, Worthwhile Canadian Initiative, said that was the most boring headline that was possible. I believe there was a contest. But this is a fellow called Wanderous Soul, or Ragnarak, at Twitter. And he has a long feed about Canada, and there's a great deal of truth in it. Canada is the most doomed nation in the West. I don't think there's a people who've so refused to move out of their 90s self-image, and it's painfully obvious the country is running off the fumes of that. It's become a gross caricature underpinned by some obnoxious neediness. Yes, the UN for several years in a row in the 1990s said that Canada was the best country on earth. And Jean Chrétien was very pleased to see this. Oh, Canada is the best country on earth because the United Nations has said so. Yeah, what are the factors there? A whole bunch of wokeness. Yes, a whole bunch of wokeness. To continue, the average leaf is a weed-addled dipshit who sincerely believes that his nationality imparts upon him a golden touch. Universally beloved because of how much he cares about the environment, 2,500 kilometers away from his own, cries about world suffering and denounces America at every turn. Yeah, they love us in Europe, man. Did you know that they love Canadians in Europe so much that Americans put Canadian, like things on their backpack so people won't think they're Americans? Yeah, okay. They love us in Holland, too, that a Canadian can't go to Holland. Well, oh, are you Canadian? Oh, let me invite you to my home and feed you. And here's my daughter. Would you like her? That's how much the Dutch love Canadians, apparently. We tell ourselves that. Canada's sole political impulse is to be more liberal than America. That's it. It's just an ever-increasing need to one-up the progressivism of 4 years ago for appearance sake. They have genuinely reached the end of history and just loop the last 15 minutes over and over and over. Well, as I quipped, almost 20 years ago, Canada is the country where boutique enthusiasms become defining national characteristics within a decade. It's never really had to develop anything by itself, for itself. Its entire economic existence was being a raw materials warehouse for a larger Anglo power, first Britain, then America. All its prosperity is derived from other powers footing the bill for our infrastructure. Well, I have to disagree with that slightly. Lots of countries have natural resources. In Canada, we have exploited them ourselves. Do you think it's the Saudis that are getting oil out of the ground? In Saudi Arabia, no, they bring in foreigners to do that kind of thing because of the belief that, you know, manual labor is infra dig. No, we have developed our forests, and we have developed the oil and gas sector, and we export oil and gas experts all over the world. Also, our mining sector. Canada is the leader in the junior mining industry, and we send our mining people all over the world. Ragnarok continues. Britain wanted big ports, big railways, choo-choo, keep that ore and timber flowing east. America wants big highways, traffic-friendly cities, so their vast army of truckers can go 24 hours a day back and forth. It wants that dirty pot of prairie oil, and it's going to pay for a pipeline. Domestically, and in terms of enduring actual historical stress periods and overcoming existential challenges and threats, the Canadian government has literally been in tutorial mode its entire existence, and now it's just kind of getting left to its own devices and fate. I'm not sure how much I agree with that, actually. Canada was set off from the United States, and of course the Conservative Party's policy was, from the very beginning, against free trade with the United States because of the belief, which it's now come true, that this would wipe out Canadian business. That oh yes, yeah, but the Canadians are still working. Yeah, some of them are still working. But the management, if you want to move past a certain level in management, you have to move to the United States. And all the ancillary services, legal, insurance, travel, and all that, that's all from the United States. In the 1960s, Lester Pearson and Pierre Trudeau were determined to destroy the old Canada, and they largely succeeded. There was an organizing principle in the old Canada. We'll just leave aside Quebec out of this. It was the empire. Canada did not have, there were no separate Canadian passports until 1947. And Canadians were born British subjects until the 1950s. But Lester Pearson, who was a KGB agent, by the way, and that's not hyperbole either, we had to have a new flag. We had to get rid of the Union Jack. We had to get rid of the Christian cross. So now we have the world's most generic flag, which inspires really nothing in Canadians. And Trudeau hated the British. And so we had to get rid of imperial measures, even though this alienated us profoundly from our main trading partner, the United States, which still uses imperial measures. But we have to have the metric system because it's more efficient. There's really nothing to say about this argument, except that Canadians all knew the imperial system, and one day, no, we're not doing that anymore. And none of this makes any sense to you, but you'll just have to figure it out somehow. To this day, Canadians prefer to buy meat, say, in imperial measures, which have been translated from the metric system. I suppose it could be argued that Pearson and Trudeau believed that in smashing the old British-centered idea of Canada, that a new, more native form of patriotism would coalesce. No, that didn't happen. There was a vacuum created, and that vacuum was filled rapidly with America, with American culture. And it was also filled, with a different kind of foreign culture, third world culture. And this is because of official multiculturalism in Canada. Trudeau, he really hated Canada. And we're going to invite the whole world over here, and we're going to tell them, stay exactly as you are, because there's no such thing as Canadian culture. Ragnarok continues, its endless appetite for immigration is not merely ideological. America's focus has shifted towards resources abroad from desperate, destabilized states, and not ones with functioning tariff systems. Canada's last gamble is to find a substitute for the former big Anglo dollars. by acquiring as much of the middle class of India, China, and the like as they can, since making their own wealthier is too much effort. They're sponges to be squeezed first by 4 times tuition rates for foreign students, and then by the property taxes on the inflating housing prices. Well, as Professor Grubel, Herbert Grubel, has pointed out in great detail, with all the data available, that immigrants are a tremendous net drag on the Canadian economy, just as they are in the United States. When they've settled here and eaten the cost, the state then becomes indifferent to their existence and moves on to the next batch of Chinese, Indians, and what is this flag? I don't know that I recognize this flag. If I click on it, oh, yes, Pakistan. Okay. It cares not if they stay or go back. It's got hundreds of thousands in tax revenue. Enjoy our stagnant, two-faced way of life. Canada is like a high turnover rate call center, or the greatest hotel on earth, as Jan Martel famously said. And he meant it as a compliment, by the way. I don't know how else to put it. Everyone in it has Stockholm syndrome for the company, or are socially pressured to take it, because they don't want to think about what happens if this trajectory is just leading into the void, which it is. We have an entirely performative political class that has no institutional experience in managing a country, a system of economic structures that is entirely geared towards being an export-heavy vassal state, and that has no ability to navigate its own obsolescence. We almost came to an end in 1995 when Quebec was within a hair of winning an independence referendum that it was very much cheated out of. That's true, by the way. That and a sense of anti-French sectarian bigotry across the whole of Anglo-Canada was the thing that passed for unity at the time. Now, if that came again, there would be no unity. The Anglo regions would be looking for their own exit and how to make it out with as much as they can loot. We're being shoved into the idiot corner and ignored internationally, so nobody would notice the red flags until it's too late. It's not like America with this mythical sacrilege against ever seceding from the Union as a legacy of the Civil War. It's an established legal option that was on the public ballot twice for Quebec in living memory, and theoretically applies to anywhere else that makes it an issue. That said, I don't even think legal and paperwork stuff is going to matter all that much, as the federal state here is not one that has a real ability to enforce its will through physical muscle. It's drunk the Kool-Aid and simply believes propaganda saturation is the only tool needed. It's getting late USSR hours up here, and not even a fun, dilapidated, and melancholic Slavic way. It's just this kind of socially pressured liberal and toxic positivity in every turn of public media, while everyone else just ignores everything boarding up around them. The turning point will probably be when the immigration slows, or in the nightmare scenario for the Canadian Treasury potentially reverses following the inevitable popping of one of the most extreme and unnatural real estate bubbles present in the world. At that point, there's really nothing keeping the already heavily duct-taped and band-aided public services and economic sectors here together. It'd just be a cascade that would blow the whole country down in about 3 months, if that. Given that we have the reputation of being a boring, polite place where nothing happens, and any economic problems we have are going to happen in tandem with the rest of the world, I dare say it's a safe bet we're not coming to anyone's attention when they're coping with their own crises. Ragnarok, or Wanderous Soul, continues, I'm already living in the post-Canada world up here. I'm embracing the mindset now because I want my behavior to follow it. I am planning and finding my life like there isn't going to be a federal government around to really have a presence, either as a friend or foe in it. Which, to be honest, there isn't. The most optimistic and obedient people I know, biggest hope is basically, gee, I hope my job is secure enough to not get fired in the inevitable mass layoffs. Everyone else is discussing backup career paths of ambiguous legality. There's a wide vibe of everyone just wanting to fly under the radar while they get their XYZ in order. They're on edge, but they don't want to let the poker face slip. In their minds, however, the specter of the day, the unemployment and paychecks stop coming, looms larger every day. When that happens, and the psychic stupor this whole country has been in for generations is rudely shaken out of them, the idea of the Confederation is getting left in the dust, and this place becomes a playground for anyone that wants to try their hand at power. Ragnarok concludes, I think I'm going to have a ball. The vital spark this country never kindled, the myths it never bothered to forge, the legacy it had no interest to cultivate, all the unformed things this beautiful land demands pass on to and become the glory of whatever sprouts from its ruins. People often ask me why I have such an interest in the United States of America. Well, America is, is big and exciting, but there's another reason that I grew up at the time of Pearson and Trudeau, when we were told that Canadian history is boring. And everyone was saying it. The whole elite was saying, oh, yeah. And they were saying, oh, we're lucky that our history is so boring. And I was a boy and I needed heroes. And I looked around and, oh, apparently America has lots of heroes. Perhaps I should start paying attention to that country. It's a big risk to destroy a country's culture in the hope that something better will come along. The Canadian elite. Well, let me put it this way. In 1967, at the time of Canada's centenary, it was arguably the best country in the world. America was richer, of course, but America had really serious racial problems in 1967. Of course, it still does. And if you look at disparities of income, Canada was better than the United States in that regard. In that year, when Canada's immigration policy was changed, it would seem the elite of Canada, and of course we got official multiculturalism 3 years later, that the Canadian elite decided to destroy Canada out of spite and boredom and the imp of the perverse, as Edgar Allan Poe would say. This country no longer has any animating principle. Oh, we used to hear about sacred social programs, safety net, according to Brian Mulroney. European countries have a far more extensive and more generous social programs, safety net, than Canada does. So if you destroy the traditional patriotism and the country enters a crisis, what's going to hold it together? Nothing. Nothing whatsoever. I'll tell you something else about my country. That the people who run my country, the people in the media, the people in government, they have no idea where wealth comes from. They sincerely believe that government creates wealth. Oh, we're going to destroy the oil and gas industry, which is, by the meanest measure, 18% of revenues, federal tax revenues. That's leaving aside all the ancillary revenues, from the ancillary industries. Oh, and it's going to be replaced by a green economy. How exactly? We'll figure something out. What's going to happen during the transition when you're going to have to keep the old, dirty economy going in order to fund and provide the inputs for this new, putatively superior economy? Oh, we'll figure something out. The government is paying all of these people not to work because of COVID. They wrecked the economy, and we'll pay you not to work. And there seems to be no end in sight. How is the federal government, going to get along, provincial governments for that matter, without all these tax revenues? Oh, we'll figure something out. There's not any serious consideration of the economic crisis that Canada is in. None. Oh, we'll just become green. That is the level of intellectual discourse in my country. Oh, and we're not like America. Yeah, okay, sure. But Canada is much, much more like America than it was 50 years ago or even 10 years ago. So let's go back to the chat. Don Willis says, Jay Bernstein of President Biden's Council of Economic Advisors. I want to unequivocally say here for the record that Building Back Better ameliorates price pressures in the long run. Ha. Texas Feral Hog says, once you've obtained an intuitive feel for metric measurements, isn't just as easy or easier than the imperial system, or scaling by half superior to scaling by decimals? Look, okay. Well, it's better, is it? No, Fahrenheit is better than Celsius because it is more subtle. Okay.
0 to 10.
Well, what's the equivalent of, 0 to 10 in Fahrenheit? It's 32 to 68, 100 degrees. That sounds really hot, doesn't it? The metric equivalent of it does not sound all that hot. It's the Fahrenheit system. It's just compressed. I'm not saying that, in Britain, they got rid of pounds, shillings, and pence, in 1970? Why? A deliberate attempt to alienate Britons from their histories and their tradition. You can say that it's a needlessly complicated system, but everybody knew it. In fact, I don't know, for a laugh, in my elementary school in North Vancouver, I think in grade 5, the arithmetic teacher taught us all to do arithmetic with pounds, shillings, and pence. Addition, subtraction, multiplication, even division. Okay, what else do we have here? Amy Schumer. Well, don't drag that woman into the chat. I don't want to talk about her commercials either. It's just, some people like to some women like to wallow in that. Did you see Kevin's retweet from the LOL female impersonator? She was actually good and good looking. Her Meryl Streep, Winona Ryder, and Drew Barrymore were excellent, says Anne Rand. Yes, they were. KMG, Palcaso 88 says, I only asked you about the Timbits because the Red Letter Media guys were goofing on it in their latest video. Yes, Colin from Canada is on their latest video, which is about a reconstructed film called New York Ninja, and they were giving them a very hard time about the Tim Biebs. Actually, Man Bravo says, to be fully vaccinated is nirvana, salvation, immortality, satori, enlightenment, moksha. Came home and had a fried bologna, which is $2 more per pack now. You see these aspirin here? After I, just finished a couple of days ago, the previous bottle, I went to, it's 500 in this bottle. Then this is the space of like 3 or 4 months. The price was 60% higher. Palcaso 88 says, Twitter is the only social media I have any use for. David Wright says, hadn't had my favorite corned beef sandwich in a while, so we ventured out. Price $13, up from $9 6 months ago. Hard pass. Don Willis says, Gallup poll of people, families making $40K or less, 71% inflation, rising prices has affected them in a harmful way. Yaiko Rapala, our Finnish friend, says, after vaccine passports, we are getting some sort of cyber passport. Can't go to a restaurant or museum without first verifying that you're not spreading Russian hacks. Ashuman Bravo says, have you heard of the 10-day simulation drill that Israel and 10 other nations rehearsed for a global cyber attack on the financial system? No, I haven't. What could they do with that? Could they take all of our money, seize all of our bank accounts for security reasons? Okay. Let's get back to it here. And, oh, yes. Oh, no, the Ukraine. What is Canada going to do about the Ukraine? Canada's armed forces are a joke. We don't even have transport planes anymore. But Justin Ling, formerly of Vice, now with Maclean's, will Canada help save Ukraine? Well, America tries to rally support and spell out real consequences for Russian invasion. Ottawa's attention seems to be elsewhere. Oh, you mean like in the COVID panic and our collapsing economy? That's just so desperately irresponsible of the Trudeau government. Canada has been a significant donor to Kiev. And of course, let's spell it K-Y-I-V. This is a transliteration, of course. It's not like we were using an evil Russian form of Kiev. It's the same word pronounced the same way, both in terms of humanitarian assistance, capacity building, qu'est-ce que c'est que ça, and military support. The Canadian Armed Forces has 200, count them, 200 personnel stationed in Western Ukraine in Lviv, conducting training exercises with the Ukrainian military. And geopolitically, few countries have been boisterously supportive of an independent and sovereign Ukraine as Canada. Well, isn't that special? And it just goes on and on and on and on. Canada has been mum in recent years on weeks on Kiev's possible NATO membership, to the chagrin of Ukrainian officials. Oh, we should be really upset that the most corrupt government in the Western world is expressing chagrin with regard to Canada. And, actually, there could be some sanity breaking out in Washington. This is from Anders Hagstrom at the Daily Caller. President Biden's administration reportedly plans to push the Ukrainian government to appease Russian President Vladimir Putin by ceding territory. The Associated Press reported Thursday Biden held a virtual meeting Tuesday with Putin, during which Biden threatened an economic response should Russia invade Ukraine. U.S. officials reportedly plan to urge Ukraine to grant autonomy to eastern regions that are still controlled by separatists who participated in the 2014 Russia-backed revolt against the Ukrainian government. Why don't you mention the Western-led coup in the Ukraine against a democratically elected government? Oh, and yes, the Maidan hoax, where the Ukrainians shot and blew up other Ukrainians and claimed it was the bad guys doing it. And we'll be going shortly to the book club. And, oh, yes, how many shots is enough? Okay, well, Pfizer CEO Albert Bourla declares fourth COVID shot needed sooner than expected. Yeah, okay, well, as we already know, a leading Israeli authority is saying that 7 boosters will be needed. This is from Mansour Shaheen at the Daily Mail. And just in case you thought that there weren't, our elite is not enjoying this, Omicron has now been sequenced in half of U.S. states as expert issues grave warning that 32,000 Americans who think that they'll be alive to celebrate Christmas and New Year's will be dead by year's end. And I'm looking this ghoul called Dr. Gregory Poland, who is one of the nation's top experts on vaccination and immunology and works as an epidemiologist for the Mayo Clinic and is editor-in-chief of the scientific journal of Vaccine. As deaths in America continue to rise, he warns that people should not let their guard down. In other words, panic, 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 stay panicked. Quote, 32,000 Americans who think they're going to be alive to celebrate Christmas and New Year's are, no pun intended, dead wrong. Not one of them believes they will die. The Grim Reaper. Hey, let's have a shout out to the Grim Reaper here. Yeah, you think you're going to live, but you're going to die. You're going to die. Go Omicron. And Kunstler calls it a punk-ass variant. This is good news, actually. But there's no good news for the COVID maniacs. This is Paul Joseph Watson at Summit News. Scientists in South Africa continue to share the positive news that the Omicron variant of COVID-19 isn't causing a spike in deaths, even as other countries like the UK continue to panic. The Telegraph reports, quote, South African scientists see no sign that the Omicron COVID-19 variant is causing more severe illness. Hospital data show that COVID-19 admissions are now rising rapidly in more than half of South Africa's 9 provinces, but deaths are not rising as dramatically, and indicators such as the median length of hospital stay are reassuring, unquote. I should explain what counts as a COVID admission. Okay, let's say you have a heart attack or a stroke and you go to the hospital and they test you for COVID and you have COVID. That counts as a COVID admission. Yes, I know. So maybe this would inflate the numbers somewhat. I would think so. And Austria leads the way, just as they did, a century ago. Again, from Paul Joseph Watson. People in Austria who remain unvaccinated could find themselves imprisoned for a year. Oh, and what's the suggestion there? Wait a minute. I think it gets worse. Oh, yes. The amendment also orders people who are jailed to pay for their own imprisonment. What's the next step? Perhaps Austria could imitate China and shoot dead the vaccine hesitant and then charge the families the cost of the bullets. Yes, because that's what they do in China. And as we've heard from so many authorities, China leads the way in COVID treatment, or COVID praxis, one might say. And what are the latest numbers from Ontario? It's just not, it doesn't look all that good for the vax. It's from Cody Wilson at CP24. Ontario continues to see a spike in new COVID-19 cases. It logged 1,453 new cases today, up from 1,290 Thursday and 1,031 1 week ago. It is the highest single-day total since May the 23rd. But no, more and more people are getting vaxxed. Why does this keep happening? Why does that keep happening? Of the new cases confirmed today, 613 involve those who are unvaccinated, 26 involve individuals who are partially immunized, 718 are in people who have received at least 2 doses of a COVID-19 vaccine, and 96 involve those with unknown vaccination status. You notice that they've changed this. It used to say fully vaccinated, now received at least 2 doses, which you know where this is going. You need 3 to be considered fully vaccinated. And those people who got the 1 and then the 2 will be told that they're not fully vaccinated. Nearly 81% of all Ontario residents, including those under 5 who are not yet eligible to receive a COVID-19 vaccine, have been given at least 1 dose, and 76% have received 2 doses. And what to do about that? Ontario expanding booster shots, get that 3rd shot, and modifying vaccine proof system in face of rising COVID-19 cases and Omicron concerns. And I'm looking at the sour face of Christine Elliott, the health minister. Yes, apparently you've got to have your QR codes. So, yeah, I guess there's some people who still don't have smartphones, I guess, but you're going to have to, the government's going to force you to get one. I mean, if you want to do anything. And this is again from CP24 from Laura Osman. COVID-19 resurgence forecast for Canada worse if Omicron replaces Delta. And this is according to Canada's chief latrine walla, Teresa Tam. Yeah, just the air was escaping out of the panic balloon, and then luckily Omicron came along. Jason Kenney, who is the Premier of Alberta, this is according to Sean Amato at CTV News Edmonton. Alberta will relax COVID-19 restrictions next week so more people can gather together for Christmas. Well, that's nice of my old friend Jason. I'll be gathering with 3 family members. We're all fully vaccinated, come from 3 households, only 4 people. But we wouldn't be able to do that based on the current rules. Kenny said he didn't detail the changes, but said there would be a modest, common sense relaxation. And let's talk about beds here. There are 4.4 million people in the province of Alberta, but there were 183 patients in intensive care units as of Monday. Kenny says he wants to fall below 173. There were 266 ICU patients on September the 28th. There's 4.4 million people who live in Alberta, and this mania for efficiency, it's an artificial crisis. It's an artificial crisis. If you need more ICU beds, then create more ICU beds. Perhaps allow a little inefficiency in the hospital system, so there's not this constant risk of panic. Anderson Cooper of CNN, according to Pam Key at Breitbart, he said Thursday that those who choose not to get vaccinated against COVID are arrogantly shirking their responsibilities to society, which he finds infuriating. Now do AIDS. Let's talk about the homosexual male's duty to society, shall we? No, we're not going to do that. This is a strange and sad and appalling story. Okay, a woman called Amanda McCulloch. Now, I know some people have said that this is made up. It's not made up. This woman has a functioning Twitter account, which she's busy on. She's involved in marketing or something like that. So she tweeted in close succession something, well, very disturbing. On July the 27th, she tweeted, "I was so relieved to get vaccinated for COVID-19 while I was pregnant this year, and to have some reassurance that I'm sharing my immune protections with my newborn now through breastfeeding. Happy to chat with expectant moms about questions if you're feeling hesitant." Exactly 2 months later, on September 27th of this year, she tweeted, "Yesterday, my littlest one passed away unexpectedly and suddenly at 2.5 months. We don't have answers on how or why, but if you have littles at home, give them an extra squeeze today. We're going to miss baby Z's smiles, giggles, and the joy he brought to our family." One of the reasons that people thought this was fake, because this woman did not appear particularly distraught at her 2.5-month baby dying. Well, and then later she said she was taking a break from Twitter or going private, going dark on Twitter because of annoying messages from anti-vaxxers. So on November the 19th, this same person, Amanda McCulloch, was on Medium. And is there a description here? Oh, she's a data viz designer, an enthusiast for using data for social good and public health. MPH, Operations Director, Data Viz Society, and Data Viz Lead. Okay. She has a piece, Another Mother's Story in Support of Paid Family Leave, how paid leave created space for my recovery after birth and grief after loss. So what kind of people, where do babies come from? The headline says mothers, and Amanda McCulloch uses the word mother, but she also uses this disgusting neologism. Well, I'll just read, okay? "I could speak at length about many of the same pain-filled themes of other mothers while I stand here today that put me in no condition to return to work in the weeks immediately following delivery. It pains me to know that 1 in 4 birthing persons go back to work within 10 days of delivery." Birthing persons. Because this is a woman. Amanda McCulloch is a woman. And as a woman, she can give birth, unlike men, but she does not want to offend the trans lobby. Just absolutely, absolutely appalling. Let's take a look at a Substack written by a man whose initials are AB. All-cause mortality in Germany is rapidly rising. During the second half of November, Germany, the largest country in Europe, had a death rate almost 25% above normal compared to 17% above normal in the first half of the month. These extra deaths are mostly not from COVID. For all of November, Germany reported almost 15,000 extra deaths. Excess deaths were almost normal in the spring and early summer. They have risen sharply since then. Germany's mass vaccination campaign for most adults began late. On May the 1st, only 8% of German adults were fully vaccinated. On September the 1st, 61% were. Is anyone even going to start asking questions, or are the public health authorities just too scared of what the answers might be? And of course, Alec Berenson has a book that has just been released called Pandemia. And it is a bestseller. But Berenson asks, by the way, guess which bestseller list Pandemia didn't crack? I shouldn't be offended, though. Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s book, which is inarguably the best-selling general nonfiction book in the United States and has been for a month, can't crack the New York Times top 5. Instead, the Times offers a list as manipulated and manipulative as the first book on it. And number one is the 1619 Project, edited by Nicole Hannah-Jones, Caitlin Roper, Elena Silverman, and Jake Silverman. But of course. And, so Pandemia is a bestseller. Well, how much of a bestseller is it? Number 10 on the Amazon nonfiction list. Number 26 on the overall USA Today list. Number 7 for nonfiction. Well, I'm glad to hear it, if only for the reason that the panic mongers are pulling their hair out and gnashing their teeth. Let's have a look at dailyskeptic.org, formerly Lockdown Skeptics. What? Professional singer exposes mask loophole by singing while she shops. Footage shows a maskless Louise Grayford buying cheese and wine while singing in the dairy aisle of a Waitrose branch in London. Funny. Downing Street Christmas party pictures will inevitably get out, says Dominic Cummings. Fines for attending house gatherings were dished out on day of Downing Street Christmas party. Another study finds that natural immunity protects better against infection than the Pfizer vaccine. English Football League calls for segregating players based on vaccination status. Achtung, papers please. If you thought Plan B was bad, wait until you hear about Plan C. Care homes could be slapped with fresh restrictions in the run-up to Christmas, and max and vaccine passports made compulsory in pubs and restaurants, under a tougher Plan C being considered by ministers. Yes, and of course, Boris Johnson is never considering any of these things until he does, and then does. Why did Pfizer refuse to distribute the vaccine in countries which didn't grant indemnity? Yeah, okay. That's an easy one. Oh, and there's a cartoon here from Bob of the Telegraph, which shows a massive boot, a massive boot, about to crush a mother and her child. And the child says, "Mommy, I'm scared." And her mother replies, "That's the spirit." Yes, we really seem to be taking pleasure in the fact that we are making children miserable and terrified. And what does that say about us? What does that say? I'm going to move to the book club now. And, I should briefly talk about Michael Nesmith, who died today. Michael Nesmith, of course, was the guitarist of the band The Monkees, and he enjoyed a solo career of some success in the 1970s and elsewhere. It's a funny thing about the Monkees that, well, I remember them well. My sister, my younger sister, was besotted with them, and of course, I took the critical view that they were, a fake band. They didn't play on their own records. The Beach Boys didn't play on their own records either, but no one holds that against them. And they were just pap. Of course, I loved the singles, at least the ones sung by Mickey Dolenz, And the Monkees were the Prefab Four. They were a joke. This funny thing happened that the further we got away from when they first broke up, the more beloved they became. And as I wrote some years ago in the American Conservative, that their greatest hits, say, match favorably with even the Beatles or the Stones. They didn't write their own songs, although Michael Nesmith wrote a few. But when you have access to the like of Tommy Boyce and Bobby Hart and Carole King and Neil Diamond, and the cream of the Brill Building. That's a good place to start. And I guess it was MTV that started the revival. They would play these blocks of the Monkees TV show, which I never really cared for. Too zany for my liking. My birthday in 1967, my father bought me a copy of the Birds, the Bees, and the Monkees. And I know he didn't really keep up on that sort of thing. And I thought, well, that's a nice gesture, but I like the Beatles, not the Monkees. I don't know. I suppose I probably listen to the Monkees more, or at least their greatest hits more than the Beatles, actually, these days. But I'll talk about that, I guess what, on Monday, Music Monday, that it's just the ubiquity of the Beatles. It's difficult to describe. I found myself eventually sickened by it. The Monkees made a record in 2016, which is, I suppose, the serious attempt, to make a great Monkees record. And it was the project was shepherded by the unfortunately late Adam Schlesinger of Fountains of Wayne and many other bands. And let's see, it's got songs by Harry Nilsson and Andy Partridge of XTC, Rivers Cuomo of Weezer, and Noel Gallagher and Paul Weller. And it's a delight to listen to, actually. Mickey Dolenz and, let's see, there were two musicians and there were two, actors in Davy Jones, and Mickey Dolenz were actors, although Davy Jones was in the touring company of Oliver, and amazingly enough, he was on the Ed Sullivan Show the same day, the same Sunday that the Beatles made their first appearance. And I think that as I say, the Monkees stuff holds up, the greatest hits, holds up really well. Indeed. Michael Nesmith's mother famously invented liquid paper. And you'd think that Michael Nesmith wouldn't have to worry about money, but apparently he didn't get along very well with his mother. And for about a decade in the 1970s, he said that he had to tell a lot of lies to the tax man. So, R.I.P. Michael Nesmith. So let's go to the book club here. And I'm going to be discussing a novel. And it's called Waterloo, Waterloo. And it is by Teresa Waugh. Teresa Waugh, I'll show you what the book looks like. There we go. You see that? Yeah. And it's about country life or village life and in England in the late 70s and early 80s. Teresa Waugh was born in 1940, is the widow of Oberon Waugh. Now, the main character in our novel is a retired career military man, and Teresa Waugh knows all about that because she is the daughter of the 6th Earl of Onslow, who was a professional soldier who won the military cross in North Africa during World War II. He also served as a prisoner of war before becoming a politician and taking his seat in the Lords. This novel is situated in the West Country, as they call it, in England. And of course, Teresa Waugh lived in the West Country for decades near Taunton, in the house that Oberon Waugh had bought called Coombe Flory. So she knows the area well. And this is a very impressive novel, I must say. It's the second one that she published after A Painting Water. It's a book. It's a book really about empathy. It describes a wide variety of different characters. And what is perhaps most impressive about the novel to me is its appreciation of how people regard others, how they rate them, if you will. And for the most part, people regard other people, rate other people based on their usefulness to them, or whether it's convenient for them to like or dislike someone. And we have old people and young people in this book, and we have people of various social classes, although the milieu in this book is, well, it's really solidly upper class, but of course there are many gradations within the middle class. Teresa Waugh, of course, was born an aristocrat, and Oberon Waugh, even though his father was a middle class striver, Evelyn Waugh, that his wife, his mother, was from the aristocracy as well. Now, let's go start at the beginning here. The book, well, it was published in 1986, originally by Hamish Hamilton. It's about a retired career military man named Jack Bennett. And we learn at the beginning that I'm sure you're familiar with this rule in armed forces. Well, most of them, probably all of them. If you have not reached a certain rank by a certain age, typically the rank of colonel, you are obliged to retire. And this is what happens to Jack Bennett at the age of 55. And he loved the army, and he loves the subject of, well, warfare. Waterloo, Waterloo, of course, is a reference to Napoleon Bonaparte, and the novel is, there are many, many allusions to Napoleon's life from the beginning to the end, and this is not an accident that we see Jack's life imitating that of Napoleon in a modest West Country way. I'll read from the first chapter. The SS Ionia sailed sedately between the vast walls of the Corinth Canal. Most of her passengers were crowded around the rails in the bows, all eager for the moment when the ship would burst into the Aegean Sea. Some cheerful boys waved at the passengers and spat at them as they passed under a flimsy-looking bridge which spanned the canal high above the liner. Among those in the bows was Major Jack Bennett, a small, elderly man with a distinctly military bearing. He wore khaki shorts, a khaki shirt, socks, and sandals. On his head he had a white linen sun hat, and around his neck hung his binoculars. He was listening intently to the blurred tones of an Oxford dawn, which were being relayed by a loudspeaker over the deck. Major Bennett already knew a certain amount about the history of Corinth, but he was ever ready to learn more. After all, these chaps had spent their lives in research. They knew their stuff. They had plenty to teach him. So far, the visiting lecturers had impressed him more than favorably. He would be interested to hear what they had to say about the excavations on Crete. Major Bennett had been looking forward to this cruise for years. In fact, ever since leaving the army, he had always promised himself that when he finally retired, he would give himself a big treat, a Greek cruise, something really worth waiting for and saving up for. Never a brilliant soldier, despite a fascination for military history and an unbounded admiration for Napoleon, Jack Bennett had nonetheless enjoyed his long years of service to Crown and country. He joined the army on leaving school at the age of 18 in 1927. He was lucky. He had seen the world, India, well, Pakistan now, the Far East, North Africa, Germany, though never Greece, and he'd enjoyed it all. When he was in his mid-30s, shortly after the war, he had married the sister of a brother officer. The union was childless but happy. After some 14 years of marriage, the first Mrs. Bennet died prematurely of cancer. Jack's brother officers were really good to him at the time. It had been a dreadful business. He was stationed at Aldershot then. So Jack remarries to a woman 16 years younger than him, named Peggy. And Peggy had a teenage son. And Peggy, it's stressed throughout the novel just how good looking she is, much younger than her age. And as Jack confesses later in the book, he was lonely, and he was an attractive, sexy woman, and he found himself married to this woman. And about a year later, a child was delivered of this union called Josephine, another Napoleon reference there. And Peggy is, well, it was of a lower class than Jack, although she doesn't seem to recognize it. She exhibits the worst kinds of lower middle class behavior, a ridiculous snobbishness, for instance, a terrible way that she treats servants, and a belief that, she knows far more than she does, that she understands far more about the world than she does. We've learned from the beginning that her first husband deserted her, just drove away one day in his Jag and never came back. And we're supposed to think that he was a rotter. And then we learn more about Peggy. Peggy is one of the most terrible women I've ever read about in a novel. Her selfishness is unbounded. She is neglectful of her daughter Josephine from the very beginning. And as many selfish people do, she believes herself to be put upon. Oh, that she has to do everything, whereas we find out in reality, she is terribly lazy. Oh, yes, lower middle class beliefs. Josephine is shipped off to a boarding school because, the schools where they are in the West Country, not far from Exeter, they're simply not up to it. So at rather considerable expense, Josephine is sent to a boarding school where she is lonely and friendless because it is noticed that she is significantly poorer than the other girls at the school. And her clothes, we find out they come from jumble sales, because why waste money on a child's clothes? And Peggy likes to spend money on herself, a lot of money on clothing and getting her hair done and her nails done. And she bullies her husband, Jack, into buying a post office in this village they live in the West Country. And it's difficult to explain. In these small English villages, the post office is, or was, in a way, the center of the village, more important than the city hall, if there is one. There's the postal part of it, but there's also it's also a grocery store. Peggy proves to be no good at this job because it requires work and it requires some foresight. And she is lacking in the capability to do either. And throughout the book, we see that Peggy chafes at her life. Now, this is the life that she has chosen. They could have lived a better life if they hadn't spent this money buying the post office, or sending their daughter to a boarding school, but she repines. Why did she marry this old, boring man whose greatest joy seems to be in the garage with his vast array of toy soldiers and the paper mache, hills and valleys that he's constructed in order to, show renditions of famous battles in history. Well, Napoleonic battles. Jack loves military history, and he loves his toy soldiers. But he's in a way been driven to the garage because his wife is so horrible. There is no other way of putting it. This is a woman who alienates her husband. Her first child, Nigel, of whom more shortly, hates her intently. Josephine comes to hate her because it's not just her selfishness. It's just that she never stops complaining, and she sticks the knife in, sticks the stiletto in frequently to everyone around her because of this strange belief in her own superiority. And of course, it's not really a surprise that she starts having an affair because her husband is good for nothing, so old, so lazy, so boring. Actually, he puts up with her quite remarkably, actually. Here's an example of her incompetence. Did you have a busy morning then, dear? Not too bad. I managed all right. A couple people wanted stamps, nothing else from the post office. By the way, you're out of toilet rolls. Mrs. Willoughby from the manor house had wanted toilet rolls, but Jack hadn't been able to find any. A ripple of discontent appeared on the surface of Peggy's good humor. Of course we have toilet rolls. You just didn't look properly. You could never find anything. She bustled around the shop, pulling things irritably off shelves. There appeared to be no toilet rolls. Mrs. Willoughby was a good customer, and Peggy felt piqued at not having been able to provide her with what she wanted. What would she think of Peggy? Peggy was also annoyed at having missed Mrs. Willoughby herself. The whole thing was particularly irritating. So she makes her husband go out to the cash and carry to buy toilet rolls, a lot of them, and insists that they be green because she has heard that the bathroom in Mrs. Willoughby's home, green tiles and, on the walls and the floors and all that. And when the green toilet paper rolls arrive, Mrs. Willoughby tells someone that she sold me these ghastly green rolls of toilet paper. Oh, by the way, Peggy doesn't cook. All of the stuff that she serves to her family begrudgingly is frozen or comes out of a tin. And even long-suffering husband Jack, he notices that, for the pudding or dessert, as they call it in England, it's always Wall's ice cream. I mean, couldn't she put herself out just a little? Because it's not that she has much to do. But, okay, let's talk about phony sophistication here. So Peggy takes a lover called Bruce, who is married and has a child. Over dinner, Bruce confided in Peggy. It was really good of her to agree to come out with him. He had been thinking of her all week and looking forward to their evening together. He hadn't been getting it on at all well with his wife lately. He suspected her of having a boyfriend. Not that it would be the first time. He could understand her, mind you. He was a busy man, and it hadn't been easy building up the business over the last few years. Of course, he had neglected his wife. He would be the first person to take the blame. But he didn't want to talk about himself. He wanted to know all about Peggy. What was an attractive woman like Peggy doing in a hidden-away place like Chadcombe? One look at the menu was enough for Peggy to decide that she would have to forget about dieting for the evening. There were at least 10 different starters to choose from before you even began to think about Sol Veronique or whatever. Peggy finally settled for the avocado with prawns a la Santa Lucia. When she thought about the evening later, she couldn't remember what Bruce had chosen. I really don't know what to have next, Peggy gazed in confusion at the menu, which was at least as big as the Sunday Express, if not so easy to read. How about the little baby small spring poussins, baby chickens, madame, tossed in butter, flambéed in Pernod, stewed in milk with a dash of cinnamon, served with cream and brandy sauce and a garnish of mushrooms, shrimps and asparagus tips on a bed of fresh green lettuce, with an accompaniment of continental vegetables, baby carrots, specially selected garden peas, boiled and creamed potatoes, and zucchini, madame, Italian baby marrows. That sounded lovely. Peggy had no room for a dessert after all that. It was a shame, really. The chocolate gâteau looked so smashing. Bruce promised to bring her back again another day. After dinner, the two sat smoking and sipping liqueurs. After eights were served with the liqueurs. They were in no hurry to go back to Chadcombe. They had the whole night before them. Bruce had fabricated some lie to account for his absence to his wife. That was a really gorgeous dinner, said Peggy. Jack and I hardly go out. He always says it's extravagant to go to restaurants. Nothing's too extravagant for a pretty woman like you, said Bruce. Just this grotesque menu that Peggy, in her delusion, believes to be haute cuisine. It's too funny. I mean, it's just, Teresa Wall really displays a really acute understanding of the appurtenances of class division. Bruce decided that the time had come to call for the bill. He snapped his fingers casually in the direction of the waiter, but when the bill came and he glanced at the total, he didn't feel nearly so casual. He found himself obliged to affect an air of nonchalance as he signed an enormous check. He hoped to God it was going to be worth it. He could hardly afford many more meals like this one. They sped home carelessly through the lanes. They had 2 bottles of wine and several liqueurs, not to mention the cocktails to start with. Peggy was decidedly a little drunk. She was laughing a lot and saying, "You are a one," or, as the bishop said to the actress, in answer to anything Bruce said. Eventually, Jack, he figures out that his wife is having an affair. By this time, he doesn't really care. Now, Peggy's first child, Nigel, he's a very strange man. He appears to be, I suppose, what you could call a volcel, voluntarily celibate, although there is a woman who is besotted with him. He lives in London, and she desperately, her name is Suzanne. She seems a nice enough girl, but she's described as being, well, chubby, I suppose you could say, perhaps fat. And she wears clothes, jeans that are too tight for her. And she has a large nose, but she wants a husband. And she has set her cap at Nigel. Nigel is terrified by the thought of physical intimacy with a woman. And eventually even his mother says, you know, "Are you one of those?" Which appalls Nigel because he isn't. He is, however, a sexual pervert. I won't go into the details. I have to really applaud Teresa Waugh for her modesty about sexual matters. It's quite a relief from the honesty, as you will, that we're deluged with these days. From what we learn about Nigel originally, he seems like a person that we would hate, but we become more sympathetic towards him. He eventually flees from London and he quits his job where he'd been for about a decade and was rising up the ladder simply to get away from Suzanne. And he deposits himself, at Chadcombe, the post office, in the house. And he turns out to be quite good at business, unlike Peggy. One, because he's, not lazy and he's rather clever. And he's forward thinking. And the post office becomes more and more successful. And he starts bringing, luxuries like, real cheese, Stilton and such like, which he discovers that the people who live there, they like it. They don't have to drive to Exeter to get it. Josephine, who visits, and her vacations from the boarding school, resents Nigel because Nigel gets along well with Jack. Jack learns of his Nigel's sexual perversion, but he's not going to make anything of it. He gets along with Nigel. Nigel likes Jack because Jack isn't the one to natter on all the time. And Josephine is furious about this. And, I'm reminded reading this novel that how profoundly women change at the time of sexual maturity. That Josephine is typical in this respect. She loves her father intensely, is shy about her mother because her mother clearly doesn't love her at all. And then, as she becomes sexually mature, she becomes irrational and angry about nothing at all and looking to take revenge against people. She starts stealing from the post office. Later, she gets a job cataloging. She's an excellent student. She gets a job cataloging books for the Willoughbys, who have a vast collection, and she starts stealing books from them. She really wants revenge on the world, and Nigel knows about her secret, stealing from the shop, and she knows about his secret. And they sort of mutually assured destruction situation. Now, as I said, that the book it's a short book, but it's vast in terms of encompassing a consideration of what it is like to grow into maturity, or to grow into middle age, or to grow into old age. Of course, Peggy looks younger than she is, but of course, eventually the dread time comes when she turns 60. She does not take it very well at all. And she's a silly woman as well as a nasty one. She's been carrying on with this fellow Bruce for years, and Bruce always moans about his wife. Well, why haven't you left her? Well, he moans about his wife in order to justify his adultery. And Peggy is not clever enough to realize that Bruce is never going to leave his wife. Because, he says there's financial issues involved. Yes, I say. Also, there's their child. This is the England that is described in Waterloo is a godless England, post-Christian. There is no depiction of any kind of religious belief whatsoever in the novel, and I don't think that is in any way outlandish. Teresa Waugh is herself an Anglican. But it's no use beating around the bush that the Church of England became dominated by, I suppose you could say, by secularists as early as 1900 or earlier. You can read George Gissing to discover this. Post-World War II, Christianity virtually disappeared, or Anglican Christianity virtually disappeared from England. And there are many nice people in Waterloo, but again, niceness is not really a moral code, is it? And it's not really much of a protection against the facts of life. Now, Teresa Waugh doesn't really make anything of this. It's, but it appears by omission. And, it becomes it's very strong theme throughout the book. What's it all for? This is the question that Jack that he struggles with at the end of the novel. What has it all been for? That he has, well, there's his wife Peggy, and then there's his daughter Josephine, who is away at boarding school and then goes to Manchester University and rarely visits. And she is not very pleasant to be around when she is, because she is taking after her mother, selfish and cruel. And late in the book, we get into this question of disputes over estates. And Josephine decides that she is going to be as bloody-minded about this as possible. Not so much because it will mean more money in her pocket, but just because she can. She can make another person unhappy with her bloody-mindedness. And it is really sad to see, because, or sad to read, because Josephine was such a charming young girl. Novels aren't that popular anymore, to the extent that people read. I guess it's they read nonfiction because, novels aren't true to life. Well, novels are truer to life than nonfiction is, than history and biography is, because the novelist has a God's eye view of humanity. And one learns or recognizes so much that is true about human nature in Waterloo, and it is also plainly but beautifully written. My highest recommendation. Let's go find a look at the chat. Enron says, Twitter seems now to have gone the way of other social media. You have to join to be able to access most things. I can still read Kevin's account, but can't see VDARE's, for example. I don't have any problem with that. I just open a private window or open it in a different browser. Let's see. Okay. What else do we have here? Let's scroll down to the bottom here at the chat. Ashley Main Bravo says, Donald Trump said on Fox News that Joe Biden is going up against Putin is like a high school football team going against the New England Patriots. There must be an evolutionary successful adaptation for women acting irrationally after reaching sexual maturity. Well, I don't know. I've seen this in my own family. Let's just put it that way. Just let's say someone in my own family is like day for night or night for day. Like, it just seemed to happen almost immediately. Like, what happened? What happened to this person? I barely recognize this person now. Ed Dutton apparently lives in Finland and is married to a Finnish woman, says Ashimane Bravo. Yakorai Paula says, I really should start a YouTube channel, even write a book about this, because Finland is a very good place to see which parts came from the U.S. since we avoided American influence 1945 to 1990. We had a catered meal in office today, quartered sheik that was smoked. Most of us were unaware, says Don Willis. Finland avoided that because we ended up a bit of a Soviet puppet state after 1944, but then the USSR collapsed and we got the same treatment. Now it's all rainbow flags and pause. Most of the negative policies in EU countries are an American imposition, but it's somewhat indirect. The US has been funding and nurturing an anti-nationalist ruling class in EU since 1945. Hey, do you remember conservative hero George W. Bush? During his administration, and these documents have been released, I think about WikiLeaks actually, that the US State Department sternly admonished the government of France that it was not being kind enough to its muzzies. And there was followed a list of the various ways the government of France could be kinder to its muzzies. And this is shocking diplomatic behavior. I suppose a government of France said, "Well, why don't you solve your black problem? before you carry on about ours, huh? But no, I mean, I noticed this during the George W. Bush administration, that it was the semi-official policy of the United States government that only one country on earth genuinely has sovereignty and legitimacy, and that is the United States of America. That for all other countries, it was conditional upon the approval of the United States government. Okay, oh, don't bring me down, Bruce, Don Willis, ELO. Catchy. Hey, that's it for today and this week. What is coming up on Theater Thursday next week? A beautiful film by Ernst Lubitsch from 1940, starring Jimmy Stewart, called The Shop Around the Corner. And on December 23rd, I'm going to be discussing The First from 1981. So that is 40 years ago. Wow. The first SCTV Christmas special. And on the book club next week, I am going to be discussing Amy Chua's Political Tribes. And on December 24th, which is Christmas Eve, I will be reading Willa Cather's short story, The Burglar's Christmas. And on Music Monday, December 13th, I'm going to be talking about Let It Be by the Beatles and the continuing attempts to persuade us or bully us into believing that this was a good Beatles album. On December the 20th, I'll be talking about Bob Stanley of Saint Etienne, his book, Yeah, The Story of Modern Pop. Hey, thank you all for tuning in. I appreciate it. I'll be back on the air Monday at 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern. If you would like to make a donation to the live stream, very much appreciated at this very uncertain time in my life. My PayPal account is linked to Kevin_Grace@hotmail.com. Once again, Kevin_Grace@hotmail.com. If you are in Canada, donations may be made directly to the live stream via Interac at kevingrace@shaw.ca. And as always, I leave you with this. In these days of social atomization and civilizational collapse, I do dearly wish that you, my dear viewers and listeners, manage to forge a genuine human connection in order to ease the burden. Good night.